What was it about Manchester in that period? I mean, obviously you have Morrissey too, and then later the Happy Monday, the Buzzcocks, I believe, are from Manchester. What was going on in the 70s in Manchester that made it such a vibrant place for this music?
It's interesting. I mean, things were happening everywhere. London was obviously the epicenter of most kind of youth cultural events because record companies and entertainment groups were there. But some of the northern industrial cities in particular have a sort of a grittiness, and they have a sense of reality which is very different to capital centres. And Manchester in particular has a peculiar kind of willfulness. When one looks at the psychological kind of demographic of the city, when you do research about the place, willfulness or bloody-mindedness comes up as one of the attributes of the city. And there is a willfulness about Manchester, partly because it's the second city, and there's a kind of an attitude as a result of that. And also a thing that happens is that because you are not the capital, you try harder. That's, you actually kind of raise your game. I mean, when I moved to London to work in '79, I did not expect to be anywhere in the kind of running of things. And I actually got to London and found a remarkable complacency about young designers in London who, because they were in London, thought they were great and didn't have to do anything. And both Malcolm Garrett and I went from Manchester and ended up dominating music design in the 80s. And Malcolm and I would get together sometimes and say, how did that happen? I mean, how did they let us wander in from the north and make such an impact? And there is a thing that from the from the other side, you sometimes raise your game and try harder. And Manchester definitely does that. And it's one of the qualities of the city. And the other thing is that smaller cities sometimes are quite empowering. One of the problems with very big places is that sometimes they're so big, and you have an idea, and that you think, well, it's a good idea, but there must be 100 other people here already doing that. You give up before you've even started. And in smaller cities, if somebody else is doing it, you know it. And if they're not doing it, then you can try it. And that, I think, is really a quality that smaller cities can and should exploit more. That the fact that there is opportunity, and if you see the need for it, then fucking hell, do it.
As creative director, and we've moved through the 80s and 90s, which we'll go back to, but I kind of imagine you telling everybody what they should be thinking.
Absolutely,
and
what they wear,
are the boss of everything creative.
We have a style police that picks people up.
Can you do that?
I could.
You could.
I could.
And what is you? That's fantastic.
And about 25 years ago, I would have done. When I was like 30, I thought there should be style police that should apprehend people for looking bad, that should close down businesses for bad signs. But
you haven't tried.
No. Luckily, I've grown out of that, and I don't care about that too much. Basically, the world is the way it is, and people have to be the way they are, and you can't. It's not. It's not wise, and it's not actually interesting to control things. My strategy for the city has been to do something from the inside out. So rather than from the outside in, not trying to kind of paint, pretty lines around the place. I mean, it came out of this notion of branding, and I'm sure everybody in the room will have heard the word brand too many times this last 5 years. And the notion of that there is a craze at the moment for branding places, cities, things, trees, lampposts, everything is a brand. And there is this notion of understanding city or place as brand. And they are brands in a way, in that they are names, and they're names that we associate with something, and names to which we attribute some understanding or value. So they are essentially a brand. But the brand of a city or a place is not like a kind of a commercial product that you can redesign, reshape, and reposition. I didn't really see it like that. And there have been there's a lot of branding projects being sold cities, states, and nations around the world. And the design profession should be ashamed of itself for what it's doing. You know, cities and states do not need logotypes. There is nowhere to put a city logo. The conventional forms of communications design are not how we understand places. We understand places from what we hear about those places, so therefore we understand places from what they're doing. And to a great extent, it doesn't really matter what they look like if they're doing something important. Anywhere on Earth that is doing something important is interesting and fascinating and magnetic to other people. I mean, Los Angeles is not actually a pretty city. I mean, it's got a few nice bits, but most of it is terrible. But you know, almost anybody in the world is very excited to visit Los Angeles at some point.
Pretty city
no, but they're feeding like culture out into the world, and things are happening in these places that make them dynamic and important. So, you know, the brand of a place is really determined and brokered by what that place is doing. And my role with Manchester has been about, you know, what the city does and how it does it. I mean, it's already, you know, kind of, it has its own dynamic energy of innovation, of regeneration, of education, of business, of technology. But then how is it doing it? What are its benchmarks for that? What are its aspirations? And then how is it understood for what it's doing? I mean, Manchester has the second biggest university campus, or the biggest university campus in Europe, but when you mention Manchester to people, they never think of it as a university city. So that is a shortcoming. That's a problem. That needs to be addressed. But it isn't addressed through doing brochures and literature and ads. You know, you don't do it that way. You have to find the other ways by which people hear about things.
Well, one of the things you said to me earlier was that you're making it you think of it as the first industrial city, and thus the first sort of modern city, or the home of the Industrial Revolution, which I think is very interesting.
That was the starting point. At the beginning, you know, 4 years ago when I started on to think about Manchester for the city council, the key provenance of the city, the thing that made Manchester a city in the first place, and the thing that thrust it into the world, was that it was the first industrial city. It is the birthplace of the Industrial Revolution. It's like the acropolis of the industrial world, and we still kind of are in the industrial age, so therefore we can call it the modern age. So that makes, you know, Manchester, in a way, the first modern city. And certainly the first industrial city, but, you know, to the claim first industrial city, I mean, what it does is it kind of underwrites your museum, and it doesn't give you a way to go forward. And what I wanted to do was, in a way, convert that equity into something that meant something now. So we took first industrial and called it original modern. And I was able to sit with the council and say, look, yes, it's the first industrial city, we know that, but we could understand it also as the original modern city. And if we think of it like that, those are timeless values. There is no reason why this city cannot be original and modern in the 21st century the way it was in the 19th. It's not going to be the prettiest, it's not going to have the best climate, but it can be important. And it was, in my opinion, that it was those values of innovation, of originality and modernity, you know, originality that has a contemporary resonance and relevance. Those were the values upon which the city was founded. And I said, it's my opinion, it is my humble opinion, that those are the values which it should strive to express in this century. And it's what you give to the world, not what you take out of it, that forges that place in the world. And, you know, luckily the council kind of endorsed, they supported that, and we set on then with a program about how we could do that. And mainly my role is as a kind of provocateur, and because you can do this, you know, the values of the original modern values, which are essentially, you know, innovation. You can do it in education, you can do it in transport, sustainability, architecture, culture, green spaces, anything. You can just start anywhere. It's about tackling the problems of the now in a way that gives a lead to other places and creates news and creates a sense of purpose for yourself. And so, you know, I interact to some extent with different activities, you know, across the city and make whatever kind of just provocative contribution. Sometimes I have no idea what they're talking about. I mean, you know, it's other people's sectors, it's other people's expertise, and I have to sit and listen and be quiet. And if I see a contribution that I can make, then I say it.